Buen día de nuevo a todos en este nuevo clip que tenemos el día de hoy. Primero, pues pedir la asistencia, como siempre, al Espíritu Santo para que nos ayude a transmitir, a captar, a cachar todo lo que nos quiere hacer llegar con esta información el día de hoy. Bueno, y nos quedábamos la vez pasada con el análisis de estos grupos de inmersión que se han ido formando pues a raíz de estas megafamilias, ¿recuerdan? Los Rockefeller, los Rothschild, que se unen, que empiezan con estos grandes capitales a formar estas fundaciones que ellos tienen, de las cuales pues van financiando a otras instituciones, otros organismos con y sin fines de lucro, con pues la intención de bajar, ¿no?, ciertos intereses que pues literalmente estas élites han venido considerando, pensando, contemplando que sería conveniente que el resto de la humanidad pues hiciera, ¿no? Entonces, pues forman todos estos grupos de inmersión, etcétera, y pues resulta que uno de sus principales intereses es la reducción de la población, porque consideran que ya somos demasiados, que estamos sobrecargando la capacidad del planeta, lo cual habría que poner entre paréntesis, porque ¿dónde viene el instructivo con la capacidad del planeta y quién lo determina? O sea, ¿quién se puede ostentar el título de creador del planeta como para poder decir que, pues, según sus cálculos, ya estamos excedidos de la capacidad de los recursos del planeta? Entonces, pero bueno, se han tomado esta atribución y por consiguiente han llegado a establecer este objetivo de reducción de la población. Y me queda clarísimo, de verdad entiendo, que cuesta mucho trabajo creer que esto sea cierto. Cuesta mucho trabajo pensar que siquiera hay personas que realmente les pudiera llegar, deja tú interesarse, sino financiar, meterle billete, hacer acciones muy concretas, invertirle muchísimos recursos humanos, capitales, etc. O sea, cuesta mucho trabajo. O sea, como que dice, ay, bueno, ¿quién puede tener esos intereses sospechosos? Deja tú ya ponerle un calificativo más fuerte, ¿no? Sospechosos. Pero bueno, como te he dicho, todo lo que yo pongo aquí me gustaría que tú lo sometas a juicio y a tu evaluación. Y pues más que poner una palabra o una creencia, que no es mi interés en lo absoluto, es compartir evidencia. Por tanto, quiero mostrarte un par de videos para pues ayudarte, ¿no?, a ver esta otra parte de la narrativa, que no nos la cuentan de esta manera, obviamente, ¿no? ¿Quién va a contar las cosas así? Sin embargo, pues esto está ahí. Entonces, permíteme mostrarte lo siguiente y pues ya tú me dirás.
Reducing population growth, that's this big benefit. The key thing you can do to reduce population growth is actually improve health.
In the developed countries, the big winners are countries that have shrinking populations.
I would like to reduce the number of people on the planet because there's too many of us.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that. We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein. In the next 5 to 10 years, for the next pandemic, we'll solve all those problems.
You say the next pandemic, there will be another pandemic.
Absolutely. We don't know when.
History teaches us that the next pandemic is a matter of when, not if.
We know what's next. We're going to have another major coronavirus pandemic before the end of this decade, before 2030.
If we really want to prevent the next pandemic, and there will be one, there will absolutely be an outbreak of another pandemic. It may be next year.
We need more money to plan for the second pandemic. There's going to be
natural gains,
the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population. Because where we are, there's nothing else.
And do you have views about what should be done about that?
Patrick, yes.
Bueno, abrumador, siento haber sido así, pero bueno, la realidad es un poco densa y no quería nada más decirlo, sino mostrarles la manera de ver las cosas de varias de estas personas que tienen acceso a estos grupos y ver cómo lo ven ellos. Ahora, obviamente esto, así como te lo estoy mostrando, pues no puede ser mostrado a las masas, obviamente, ¿no? Entonces sería pues muy denigrante y no hay ningún interés en poner en contra a toda la humanidad. Entonces, para hacer estos objetivos realidad, han utilizado otra narrativa mucho más amigable, mucho más llevadera y en la cual nuevamente pues los que suenan muy bien y aunque los como si nos ponemos a ver ya exactamente cómo es el método, ¿no? Pues ya los medios podríamos estar en desacuerdo con ellos, ¿no? Entonces se ha escogido la narrativa del cuidado del planeta. Se ha vuelto todo esto tan poderoso, una agenda tan fuerte sobre la sostenibilidad, este término, que bueno, ser sostenible, el mundo significa en una sola palabra, o sea, esta palabra es con un muy doble sentido, pues regresar a la explicación de que estamos sobrecargando la capacidad de la Tierra. Por consiguiente, lo que tendríamos que hacer sería pues reducir a la gente. Entonces, para hacerlo sostenible, es necesario reducir a la población. Son pues dos caras de la misma moneda. Por eso esta palabra pues viene a ser muy peligrosa. Ya nos lo advertía un sacerdote, Juan Claudio Sanahúja, que nos advertía de esto. Copiaré en la descripción su conferencia donde pues él dedicó buena parte de su vida, este sacerdote del Opus Dei, a investigar este trasfondo, ¿no? Un tiempo atrás. Igualmente lo tacharon de loco y pues no sé, ¿no? No le hicieron mucho caso y demás porque pues cuesta trabajo todas estas cosas. Pero él estudió y analizó y llegó a esta conclusión de lo peligroso que es utilizar esta palabra de la sostenibilidad. Bueno, no te lo pierdas, lo dejo en la descripción de este video. Bueno, entonces, para poder hacer este planeta sostenible, tenemos que cuidarlo y entonces se hace muchísimo énfasis en el cuidado del planeta, pero con un peligro catastrófico, una amenaza terrible a la que tenemos que cuidarnos, que ha venido cambiando con el paso del tiempo. Recuerdo cuando yo era más joven, se hablaba de la capa de ozono, ya eso pasó de moda. Y luego pasaron al calentamiento global. Luego hubo una cantidad abrumadora de evidencia que demostraba que el planeta no se estaba sobrecalentando. Entonces cambiaron al cambio climático, lo cual pues es toda una concepción también, ¿no? Engañosa, porque mientras que es una realidad que el clima en el planeta cambia todo el tiempo y conforme de un lado tienen un clima, pues conforme va habiendo rotación tienen el contrario en el otro lado. Bueno, eso es normal. Pero hacen ver este suceso como algo catastrófico y no nada más catastrófico, sino que además la culpa de este cambio climático viene a ponerse sobre los hombros de los seres humanos. O sea que, como lo explicaba Bill Gates, ¿no? O sea, por culpa de la población y del consumo que hace energético, los recursos que se necesitan para producir esta energía están siendo, pues, nuevamente no sostenibles, ¿no? O sea, están siendo acaparando la capacidad de la Tierra y por consiguiente ya no están haciendo sostenible para todos, ¿no? Ya no da abasto la capacidad del planeta para todos. Entonces, esta viene a ser la narrativa que se nos está vendiendo, la del cambio climático y que todas estas catástrofes que se nos vienen encima, ¿no? Terremotos, inundaciones, lluvias, etcétera, o sea, torrenciales, que bueno, en otro momento explicaremos lo que son los chemtrails, ¿no? Pero ¿cómo es verdad que si el hombre puede alterar el clima, puede ahuyentar las lluvias o a través de metales, rociando metales, pero bueno, será un momento en otro episodio. Pero lo que están haciendo ver es que nosotros, como ciudadanos de a pie, estamos alterando el clima, no porque estemos utilizando estas otras tecnologías de chemtrails, de las cuales hablaré más adelante, pero que nosotros, con nuestro uso irresponsable del planeta, es decir, teniendo familia y pues viviendo simplemente por el hecho de vivir y utilizar los recursos que utilizamos, pues nosotros estamos acaparando la capacidad de la Tierra y eso está haciendo que pues no nos dé abasto para todos los que somos. Por consiguiente, algunos tienen que saltar del barco. ¿Y qué crees? Que ellos van a tomar la decisión de quiénes serán. De hecho, ya lo han hecho. Entonces, esa es la narrativa oficial, ¿sí? El cuidado del planeta bajo este halo del cambio climático, que tenemos que pues, ser conscientes porque se nos viene encima la catástrofe, donde habría que separar algunas cosas aquí. Esta responsabilidad del cuidado del planeta la hemos llevado siempre, ¿no? Siempre tenemos que ser cuidadosos de cualquiera de los recursos, eso es de siempre, pero lo que no es verdad es esta parte de que cargamos sobre nuestros hombros la culpa de las catástrofes climáticas y que nosotros tendríamos un poder extremo como para poder hacer estos impactos en el planeta. Es mucha soberbia como decir que nosotros, en palabras del premio Nobel, él lo describe, lo verás, te lo pondré en un video ahora, que él dice, somos como musgo, o sea, musgo de una piedrita en el planeta, o sea, jamás, no tenemos el poder ni la injerencia de mover un grado en la lejanía o la cercanía de la Tierra o de nuestro planeta respecto al Sol. O sea, es mucho decir que es lo que mayormente altera el clima. Pero esto no lo han vendido como que sí. Entonces, como no quiero ser yo la que nada más te platique, te voy a poner aquí lo que opinan algunos premios Nobel y otras personas con respecto a esta narrativa que se nos ha vendido sobre estas catástrofes climáticas por culpa del ser humano.
I am going to talk about global warming revisited. The reason is revisited, I got introduced to global warming here in Lindau. And I was in a panel discussion in 2008. And it was a panel discussion about global warming. Global warming is really a hot topic. And what I said then, and which I still believe, is that global warming really has become a new religion. Because you can't discuss it. It's not proper. The American Physical Society, which I was a member, said the evidence is incontrovertible that global warming exists. Now, think about that. This is a physical society. And they say you cannot discuss global warming because we believe it's happening. It's like the Catholic Church. The only answer to that is to resign. So it really, global warming really starts with these two people, Al Gore and POR QUÉ, however you pronounce it again. From 1880 to 2015, the temperature has increased from 288 to 288.83 Kelvin, 0.3%. I think the temperature has been amazingly stable. So here is then where the temperature is measured. And you see there's point on the graph, so if you can read that. So if you go finally to the South Pole, there are 8 thermometers, according to NASA. That's all they have, including the South Pole, 8 thermometers. And so if you had 8 thermometers to measure the average temperature in Germany, where would you put those 8 thermometers? You know, 8 thermometers for the continent. It's nothing. And the fact is, as I deal with the South Pole, there has never been as cold on the South Pole as it is right now. There's more ice than there ever have been. And this is for the last 19 years, roughly speaking. The temperature has not gone up. It's been constant for 19 years. So it hasn't gone up with that. Well, here is the latest temperature they have measured now. And they see the curve here. And if you look at the edge here, it goes up. the temperature here goes up. How can that be when I just showed you the other curve, the temperature has been constant? Well, the reason for that is that they include now the ocean. But for 100 years, the ocean has not been included. Why do you think they include the ocean? Because it's more accurate, or because they can fiddle with the data? That's what NASA does. So Obama said last year that 2014 was the hottest year ever. But it's not true. It's not the hottest year. So if you don't believe I'm cheating you, here's some satellite data, and this is the peak in 98, and you see basically the satellite data shows the same thing. The temperature has not increased. So you can't believe then the people who are the alarmists said that CO2 is a terrible thing, and therefore you have to not drive and use solar cells and stuff because otherwise the world will go to pot. But it's not true. It's absolutely not true. So nature, in its wisdom, this was happened actually in 2012. And nobody mentioned nature how important the CO2 is for plant growth. If you have more CO2, the plant grows faster. People use greenhouses and put CO2 in greenhouses to get a higher yield. But now, since the CO2 has increased, we get more plant and more grows faster. It's a wonderful thing, but they don't talk. That's what it was. But the climate changes anyway. The climate has always changed. But the people who believe in global warming said the reason climate changes is because of global warming. Another thing which amazes me really is that when they talk about climate change, it's always to the worse. See, the climate also changes to the better. And if climate changes, you have a 50% chance anyway, it got to be better someplace, for heaven's sake. It can't always be to the worse. So then comes the clincher. If climate change doesn't work to scare people, we can scare people talking about extreme weather. That must work. So here is extreme weather. And the question is the ocean level rising? But this scale is in thousands of years, and this scale is in meters. If you look at the recent scale, then you see it here, this scale out, you can maybe read that, and this scale here is in centimeters. And for the last 100 years, the ocean has risen 20 centimeters. But for the previous 100 years, it also rose to 20 centimeters. And for the last 300 years, ocean has risen 20 centimeters 100 years. And so there is no unusual rise in the sea level. And to be sure you understand that, I'll repeat it. There is no unusual sight in the sea level. And cheap energy is what has made us so rich. And now suddenly people don't want it anymore. See, we should continue. And people say the oil companies are the big bad people. I don't understand why they are worse than the windmill companies. General Electric made windmills. They don't tell you it's not economical because they make money on it. But nobody protests, but they protest to Exxon, who makes oil. I mean, they're very good companies, but their companies are efficient, and that's why we have it so nice today. So here is a statement by Obama. He gave a recent speech at the college in the United States, and he said, no challenge poses a greater threat to future generation than climate change. How can he say that? And I say this to Obama, excuse me, Mr. President, but you're wrong. See, he is dead wrong.
Global warming. This is one of those cool things where there is not a shred of evidence. And I'm not lying to you. I've been studying this for a long time. I've read a lot of books about it, and I've read a lot of the research papers. There isn't a shred of evidence that human beings have had any effect on this planet other than just billboards. I mean, we put out a lot of billboards and buildings and stuff. We haven't affected the climate. And the CO2 has such a tiny effect. Even the CO2 that's there, the bulk of which isn't our problem, it's always there. You know, And the guys that are now running that, like the people that got in trouble at Hadley Center, which is like the University of East Anglia in England, that got their emails all published, and some of them were kind of embarrassing. Those guys, they're like computer jocks. They're not climatologists. And in my opinion, climate is something that didn't start in 1900. You know, if you want to know about climate and climate change, then you need to know things like when was the Eocene and what was the weather like. The Eocene was like about 40 million years ago, and the planet was pretty much trees. There were gymnosperms because the angiosperms hadn't happened yet, but there were trees from pole to pole, and it was a fairly temperate time, and the CO2 levels, and we know this all from proxy measurements and stuff, but they're pretty decent measurements, were 2,700 parts per million. That they're now 340, which is a little higher than 270, which is what they were historically before we started supposedly polluting the atmosphere. But there's a big difference between 340 and 2,700. It probably had something to do with the fact that the Earth, in its orbit, is not exactly always pointed in the same direction. It's precessing around its poles. It's nutating around that, meaning it's accelerating and decelerating of that precession. It's pointing in all different directions over long periods of time that can actually be, you can predict them. I mean, they're not like random things. It's just like, yeah, it's a big top, and it's affected by all these other planets and stuff. And you should be able to take those things and make some sense out of them in terms of climatology. Over the last couple of million years, we became quite successful as a species because the climate was changing rapidly, and we were able to adapt to it. That's the natural state of things here, you know. And it isn't because of us that it happened; it's because it happened that we're here. And it's really silly for people to walk around saying, "Save the Earth," you know, from us. Like we're like the moss that grows on the rocks here. We're not a very big part of it. We really aren't. We've overblown our presence here. And that is a foolish paradigm that we have allowed to sort of permeate in a whole field. And all the real climatologists have been replaced by these guys that write global circulation models that say, if this happens, then the temperature will go up by 5 degrees within the next. In my opinion, climatology has become a kind of a joke. The people that are real climatologists do think about things like all the global epochs that the Earth has gone through in our way of looking at it. But the guys that are getting the headlines and stuff, and that are meeting in Copenhagen and deciding that everybody's got to stop cooking over sterno stoves in Africa or whatever, I mean, those people don't know nothing. They really don't. And if you
I resent you calling me a denier. That is a word meant to put me down. I'm a skeptic about climate change, and I want to make it darn clear, Mr. Kenny's not a scientist. I am. He's the CEO of the Weather Channel now. I was the founder of the Weather Channel, not the co-founder.
And I'm glad you did, because I am addicted to the Weather Channel. I watch a lot of cable news.
Now, hold on just a minute. I'm not done. And CNN has taken a very strong position on global warming that it is a consensus. Well, there is no consensus in science. Science isn't a vote. Science is about facts. And if you get down to the hard, cold facts, there's no question about it. Climate change is not happening. There is no significant man-made global warming now. There hasn't been any in the past, and there's no reason to expect any in the future. There's a whole lot of baloney, and yes, it has become a big political point of the Democratic Party and part of their platform, and I regret it's become political instead of scientific, but the science is on my side.
I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion about the topic right here. What I do wonder, though, is when you see
because you wouldn't allow it to happen on CNN, But I'm happy
Well,
that I got on the
we've
air
been
and got a
talking here for
chance to
several
talk
minutes.
to your viewers. Hello, everybody.
What
There
I
is
do-
no global warming.
What I do wonder is when you see the government, when you see NASA, when you see other institutions say that 97% of climate scientists agree, do you think they're making it up? What I don't understand is how you
Well, that's a
square
manipulated
that.
figure, and let me explain it to you. The government puts out about $2.5 billion directly for climate research every year. It only gives that money to scientists who will produce scientific results that support the global warming hypothesis of the Democrat Party position. So they don't have any choice. If you're going to get the money, you got to support their position. Therefore, 97% of the scientific reports published support global warming. Why? Because those are the ones the government pays for, and that's where the money is. It's real simple, but that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't make it true. That only makes it bought and paid for. The money goes in circles.
Mr. Bloom, for 1.5 minutes, please.
Well, Mr. President, of course, you can tell I'm a scarecrow because I don't dress like a scarecrow. I fought my way through the blizzard in Copenhagen, like many of you did. Interesting, isn't it, that we've had the coldest winter so far on record in London for 30 years. It's the same in Poland, it's the same in Korea, it's the same in China. We've had the coldest temperatures in Florida, Arizona, Texas, the first snow in Texas, I think, for 100 years. And of course, as Charles Corrin of the London Times said, my goodness me, and we simply don't get it, of course. Of course, that's what global warming is all about. We've got to get used to freezing temperatures. Well, we've seen the Al Gore hockey stick, which is still, I gather, being shown in London state schools. Al Gore, snake oil salesman, crook. We've seen Professor Jones from the East Anglia University, crook. And now, you won't know about this yet because it's been kept out of the public domain, the New Zealand National Climate Database, and I have the figures here, all fraudulent. When are you all going to wake up? Scam, scam, scam.
Señor Bloom.
Esto suceda, pues sencillamente porque, como lo explicó Patrick Moore, pues hay dinero que financia estas narrativas. Obviamente no podrían llegar a tener tanta audiencia y tanto alcance sin pues haber una cantidad importante de dinero por detrás. Y aunque esto cuesta trabajo creer nuevamente, pero bueno, voy a poner aquí también un video del profesor Klaus Schwab, fundador del Foro Económico Mundial o Foro de Davos, también conocido, quien pues muy orgulloso platica, ¿no? O sea, cómo han ido penetrando los gabinetes de todas áreas, ¿no? O sea, por supuesto, gobiernos obviamente son sus primeros empleados, pero también de las compañías, de la iniciativa privada, educativa, incluso religiosa, ¿no? Y aquí te lo dejo.
When I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. Mm-hmm. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more, half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.